Hi, friends. So today I want to feature a bit of a case study on one tool that's been built out by a local organization here in Metro Vancouver. They're the Pacific Legal Education, and what they do is legal education with a real focus on supporting nonprofits to make sure that they're on the right journey, on the right path. And so what they've done, in addition to their other programming, is they built out a bit of an AI chatbot. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what is this? And two, how could you use it? And then three, maybe, what was the process? Like, could you take some of the data and best practices that you developed as an organization and bring that back to your own organization and say, does this model of a chatbot work for your own organization too? And so to take us through all of this, we've got two guests with us, both from Pacific Legal Education and Outreach Society. So we'll have Kris coming in about midway through. But to start us off, I'm really excited to bring in Minnie Karanja, who is the Acting Director of Innovation and Engagement over at PLEO. Minnie is a values aligned nonprofit leader who works with nonprofits and purpose driven social impact organizations to advance justice, equity, and inclusion. Her role with Pacific Legal Education and Outreach is to make legal information accessible to nonprofits across Canada through partnerships and deep technology, including AI. That sounds fascinating. Let's get into it. Let's learn a little bit more. So, with that, I'm delighted to pass the baton over to Minnie. Take it away.
Thank you, Eli. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Minnie Karanja, as already mentioned, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. I'm joining you from Vancouver, the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. It's a real honor to be here. Yes, I will be talking about legal education for nonprofits with Pacific Legal Education and Outreach, an organization that has been doing legal education and providing legal guidance resources for the nonprofit sector for over 2 decades, starting off in the arts sector and now really scaling across Canada and trying out different tools, different ways to get information in a very accessible, low barrier way to nonprofits. And that's how led it, and that's how we were led to venture into the AI chatbot space, which my colleague Kris is going to be joining us to speak about. So I will be taking you over that to see the resources that we've developed to support nonprofits and then shape the conversation to speak about our journey trying out the process of developing our AI chatbot in the legal space and all the complexities and fun things that came with that. What you're seeing in front of you is lawfornonprofits.ca, and this is the platform that we have been deepening and really building out resources on the most common legal issues the nonprofits face. And I'll take you through this, guiding you through the resources, and we'll go deeper into an example. So, what you can see here is the three most common legal issues that we have identified over a period of time working with nonprofits. And our work has been confirmed with other organizations that are providing legal resources and guidance for nonprofits that record keeping, privacy, and employment are the most common legal areas where nonprofits have challenges that are always coming up and questions around these three areas. Because we started off here in BC and are based here in Vancouver, we have the Societies Act here. So we did a lot of work when the Societies Act was amended to really build information and guidance and resources for nonprofits to understand their responsibilities and what's changed within the act and get them to be compliant. And so, what I would like to do today is explore the privacy resources here. As I go through this, notes that this is the way you navigate this resource is the same for all the other areas. So, we have three tools here that I'm going to take you through. Okay, there we go. So we have legal help guides, which are legal pathways, and it's an assessment, a self-assessment then that nonprofit staff can do on their own to get the answers that they're looking for in this area of privacy. So to navigate this, I'll start off by showing you the fact sheet. So we have fact sheets for each of the legal areas. And this fact sheet obviously is about, so say an executive director wants to start the process of developing a privacy policy for their organization, they can come here to the fact sheets and see what's the different areas. And again, these are areas that we know there's a lot of questions. So for instance, learning more about what the privacy policy needs to cover. If they click on this, then you'll have this really beautiful worksheet that provides succinct information, even tells you how long it's going to take to read through this content here. And something to note about this content, it's been developed by lawyers, nonprofit and charity lawyers. So the content is accurate. When you're here and you get the information, you don't need to go over to Google or whatever ChatGPT to verify the information you get here. It is up to date and so very reliable and can be trusted to use as soon as you get the information. So this is an example of a fact sheet. As you can see, it's very succinct, covers all the main areas that a nonprofit needs to have when it's thinking about a privacy policy. And then we have other areas too. People always have questions like, what does disclosure of personal information mean? And so here's a fact sheet that really provides succinct information on what it means to disclose information, to whom information must be disclosed, whom it cannot be disclosed to, and the intentions around that. So yeah, this is just various resources for a nonprofit that is exploring a privacy policy or wanting to learn more about it. Again, here we have the anti-spam law, which is very important for organizations today to make sure that they are compliant to that. So Canada has rules about sending certain types of messages to groups of people. The Canadian anti-spam law, also called legislation, the CASL. There's succinct information here to go through. Away from the fact sheets, we have FAQs as well in an effort to make sure that this information is as accessible as possible. You can see that we have kept the language plain. It's plain language. It's not a lot of legal jargon here. And the purpose of having a fact sheet, one may wonder, why do you need an FAQ if you have a fact sheet? These are all different ways of making sure that the information is accessible. So here are FAQs. People want to know, for instance, what really is considered personal information. It's people's names, their email addresses, their SIN numbers, medical information, educational and educational history and employment status, really breaking it down to the very simple understanding of what personal information is. So we've done all the synthesizing of the information and we really present it in a way that is accessible and there's no need of reading rolls and rolls of pages to understand what this different information that is required to understand what a privacy policy must adhere to. And another question that we get people coming to ask a lot around privacy is, what does consent mean? When we talk about implicit and explicit consent, what really is the difference and what level of consent can an organization or should an organization aim for when they're going to make sure that they get the consent? And so here we really break it down in this FAQ. Another way to interact with this website is sample documents. So an organization really wants to see, what does a privacy policy look like as they go towards that goal. I've just opened it here. So we've provided this as a sample for organizations to review and have something in mind as they're building the policy. So this is just an outline of what it's going to look like. So the definition of personal information that we just talked about, how the information is going to be collected from whom, all the key topics that need to be covered in a privacy policy are here. So this is very helpful for organizations that are just starting off building out their privacy policy. Okay, this is the last one, the helpful links. These are external resources. Some of them link back to us. This one certainly goes to the government website on Canada Anti-Spam Law, access to records, Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner of BC. So say an organization wants to have really deeper understanding on what their obligations are at a provincial level. Here we have this for BC. Of course, this is going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Yeah, privacy checklist and record keeping. So these are resources that are external, and it's very important to note that all external content may or may not be information that we have verified. But for the first four, this is all information on this website that has been developed by lawyers and so is accurate. At this point, I want to go back to the help guide because this is one of the most used resources for organizations that are looking for legal guidance. And so it's a legal guide. And we're going to pretend for a moment that we are an organization that is developing a privacy policy for the organization for the first time. And so we have this digital being here that is going to take us through an assessment, a self assessment, asking questions, and we're going to respond, and it's going to guide us to develop our own privacy policy. Immediately, you can see we have our first question here. And I want you to take note that on the left side here, we have a status bar that shows how much progress we've made into this assessment. It's not very long. It only take about 3 minutes to complete it. So let's get going. Does your nonprofit have a privacy policy? And I'll respond no. I may respond no to most of these questions for the purposes of demonstration. Does your nonprofit's privacy policy define personal information? I respond no. And as you can see here, a to-do list is starting to be populated, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Does your nonprofit's privacy policy explain the collection of personal information? I respond no again. Does your nonprofit's privacy policy explain the purpose of collecting personal information? No. And as you can see, there are hints along the way here, and we're going to explore this particular hint. Does your nonprofit's privacy policy explain when personal information might be disclosed? So this is very important for organizations to consider in the conversation of collecting data. The individual from whom you're collecting data must be aware of where the information is going to be disclosed to whom and under what circumstances. So the hint here is, what does disclosed mean? And if an organization does not have a clear understanding or a collective understanding within the organization as to what disclosure means, they can go back to the FAQs or the fact sheets and deepen their understanding. So, again, for the purposes of demonstration, I respond no. Does your nonprofit's privacy policy include rules for keeping personal information? Again, it's no. Does your nonprofit's privacy policy cover all of its board of directors or its members, workers, employees, and contractors, as well as volunteers and people it serves? No. And this question is very detailed because it gets the organization to consider all these different categories of individuals, categories of workers and volunteers within the organization that will be impacted by the privacy policy. Do staff, directors, or board members and other volunteers receive training on nonprofits' privacy policy? What does training mean? So it's very specific language when you're talking about the privacy policy. Training needs to be specific and the organization needs to have a clear understanding so that when boards of directors or volunteers say they have received training, everyone is on the same page as to what that really means. And there's a collective understanding that training entailed specific understanding around these issues. Okay, so that's the end of this assessment. We've responded no to most of these questions. So our to-do list is pretty extensive here. And so we'll hit the button here says view my results. And here you go. So again, the purpose here is to help nonprofits navigate a legal issue without a lawyer. So saving them a lot of resources that they would have used if they had engaged a lawyer. We've no we've noticed or we have a good understanding that a lot of the organizations that have accessed this platform are organizations that are smaller with the budgets of less than $250,000. So obviously, they do not have lawyers on staff. Accessing lawyers usually does involve paying hefty legal fees, and that is something that they avoid. So again, we want to help nonprofits be able to address or understand an issue before it becomes a crisis where they have to incur even greater legal fees trying to resolve that and undoing things that they may not have had to go through. So here in creating a privacy policy, our to-do list has is very comprehensive. It talks about what an organization needs to do now, as in right now after it's completed doing this assessment or in the next couple of few weeks or months, it needs to start thinking about developing a document that is going to describe how a nonprofit deals with personal information, dealing with personal information, and it goes into details, helping the organization really have a starting place when it starts to think about these issues. So reminding the organization that it needs to include collection, use of that information, the disclosure, the retention or storage of it, and reminding organization that every nonprofit in BC is actually required to have a privacy policy. And again, we reiterate, we have an example of a privacy policy, which I showed to you before. And another step that nonprofits can take immediately is to start training staff and teams on board, the volunteers, the board of directors on what a privacy policy is. And it could be even doing this assessment as I did together with their team members. And then later on, here is what a nonprofit needs to do to get the privacy policy. All these on their own without external intervention, that is getting additional resources or getting a lawyer engaged, for instance. It's a legal issue. So we found that a lot of nonprofits are sometimes they get stuck in this place where they're not sure of what they're doing or what they're supposed to do in case of a legal issue like this. So this tool has been very helpful in that way that it's already been developed by lawyers. So it is trustworthy from that point of view. So here is what an organization needs to do later. It needs to define, have a collective understanding of what personal information means within the within the privacy policy context. It needs to revise the policy to explain how personal information is collected. So everybody on the team knows that these are the various methods that we use as an organization to collect personal information, having had a clear understanding and a collective understanding of what is considered personal information. An organization needs to revise and, in this case, create a new privacy policy that explains the purpose of collecting personal information and and having a way to communicate to the people where they're getting this information from. Yeah, explaining the purpose of it. Revised organizations, the privacy policies organization to explain personal information where it might be disclosed, in cases where it might not be disclosed. That's important for people to understand that. And the last two here is about the privacy policy, the rules of keeping the information where it's going to be stored, so everyone knows where it's being stored and it's easily accessible to the people who must have access to it. The last one here is revising the policy to make sure that everyone is covered, the board of directors, the workers, the people it serves, the volunteers, that everyone is covered by the privacy policy. This is how this platform works. I wanted to make sure that I deepen an understanding for everyone from the 5 minute presentation we did earlier to give people confidence to navigate this platform. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and check my colleague. Kris must be here. I see Kris here, and he is going to take us through the other portion of the AI chatbot. So, in addition to the tools that I've shared, or the fact sheets, the FAQs, the legal help guide, we have been playing around in a sandbox with the AI chatbot, and it's been a very interesting journey that I will now hand it over to Kris to speak about how that has been. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Minnie. Hello, everybody. Nice to be talking to you today. about the AI chatbot that we've been building, I'll do a quick little run through of our demo version. And if you just in a couple minutes, the chatbot basically grows out of everything that Minnie was just showing you. It's essentially a different way of accessing much of the same information. The chatbot isn't finalized yet. So we're still working with setting the guardrails and things like that are involved in AI. Now, I am no AI expert. I have been involved in the testing, so I'm very aware of the process that we've been going through. But the actual chatbot has been built and is being developed with Contend Law out of Toronto. And they're building it based on a similar program that they built for a company in England. And so it's been very exciting to explore the world of AI. I'm completely new to it. This actually was my first experience with it. It's really an interesting process. So what I will do is I'll bring up our chatbot. Let me go to share screen. Share. I want to share. Let's see. Share screen and oops. Now the whole. Wait a sec. As I show that I'm not on one moment. Let's stop sharing there and let's try allow to share window. Can we see this window? Can anybody see?
No.
You don't say yet. No.
Okay, hang on one sec. I obviously clicked something wrong. Go to share screen. Jesus, we turn off while sharing your screen. Right click in your website. Okay, hang on one sec. What I want to share is this thing, and apparently I feel like a dingbat. Hang on one.
No, it's may also different just be it looks like some of the more specific options are sometimes tied just to the Chrome browser. Like
Oh, okay. I'm
but
I'm
that may be
on.
the issue, but honestly, if you do a share screen, once you move to the other place, we won't see like this infinite video
Yeah.
replay. So yeah, this looks fine.
Okay, so you can see it.
Totally. Look, I'm seeing yeah, just the chat bot full screen.
PLEO chat.
That's great.
Okay. That's what I couldn't tell. And then I was like, wait a sec, I can't see myself. Feel lost in these video chats without seeing without the comfort of my own face. All right. So here's the PLEO chatbot demo. This is not at all what it will look like when it eventually migrates to our website. This is just a demo mode that we're using to test. Basically, we've had several testers. We go in and ask questions. And so I've typed a question in here already. And so I'll take you through the process. So I decided to use a question because we get so many questions. We've got 20 years of questions from nonprofits. A lot of them are quite similar. That's actually what the legal help guides on the website are based on. I decided this is a recent question that we had come up, and I tested it to make sure it didn't immediately hit guardrails. The first phase of testing of the AI chatbot, it was quite amazing, but we discovered that it was pulling information from all over the internet, which means it wasn't information that had been verified by us. What we're trying to do is actually have this all based primarily around our verified information that we have generated and that is on the website. But the chatbot allows your access to be quite conversational. There is that interactive model of the legal help guides. The question is, can we take it one step further? Because a lot of times people have a specific question. I know this is the way that I respond sometimes. Oh, is this understanding the question I'm asking? And you just feel more comfortable asking a question rather than poking through the legal help guides. But the legal help guides are great. So I typed in this question. We filmed a public meeting and shared it publicly online, but a member complained that they weren't notified. Can we post it anyway? I tried to keep the question to the way that somebody would show up on the website and ask the question. You're going to see the screen's going to flicker a bit. This is just how the demo works. Maybe it won't do it this time. It'll definitely do it the second time. So I didn't do it then. So you can see the AI assistant says, in British Columbia, when it comes to filming public meetings, it's generally a good practice to notify participants that the meeting will be recorded and shared. However, whether you can post the video despite the complaint may depend on your organization's policies and any applicable privacy laws. Could you tell me more about your organization and its policies regarding filming meetings? Also, was there any specific notice given to attendees about the recording? In this case, I know there was no specific notice given to attendees, and we don't have any policies, the typos get included, regarding filming meetings. And then since there was no specific notice given to attendees and your organization lacks policies on filming meetings, it may be wise to consider the concerns of the member who complained. While you might still be able to post the video, it could lead to further complaints or issues regarding privacy. It might be beneficial to establish a policy for future meetings to ensure everyone is aware of recording practices. Would you like information on how to create such a policy or guidelines for future meetings? And so again, the idea is to keep it conversational. That's how chatbots work. And ideally, it's something very close to how you would talk to a lawyer. Let's just see what happens if I say, yes, I would like that information. There, that's the flashing that I was talking about. And then it gives us the example to create a policy for filming public meetings. Consider including the following key elements: notification, consent, purpose of recording, access to recordings, privacy considerations, review process. Would you like more detailed examples or guidance on any specific section of this policy? I'll just go one more level. I've done so much testing on this over the past few months that I don't know what, like, it's all starting to blur together. More detailed examples would be great. Let's say this is just the chatbot won't do the kind of massive scrolling that it's doing here. And then it gives us more detailed examples for each section of a filming policy. Now, the one question that I don't know in regards to this particular question is, much of this information is probably not coming from our website. And this is one of the things that we're working through and testing. The idea, I will come back, I don't think I need to show you anymore. The idea for the chatbot is to have it really based on the PLEO base of knowledge. And very meta sample question. This is another place where it comes up. I see Eli mentioned in the chat. It does come up with recording webinars and things as well. PLEO has recently arrived at the conclusion that given the nature of a lot of the legal conversations that happen in our webinars, we used to put them all online. Now we don't. And that's just to keep us on the safe side. Sometimes a lawyer might get something wrong. Sometimes somebody might feel uncomfortable with what they shared. And so we just, as a practice, we don't share that stuff. But the idea for the chatbot is to work from the base of knowledge that PLEO has built over the past 20 plus years of the work that we've been doing. And it really creates another way for people to access that information. So growing off the legal help guides and giving people another way, a more conversational way to access that information. In terms of the building, this has been going on for probably just a little under a year. The testing's been going on since mid-December. And as I said at the beginning of the meet talking, that this is the second wave of testing that we're in. There were some other questions that I would have liked to have demonstrated, but they were really hitting the guardrails hard. In the first wave of testing, there were virtually no guardrails. Second wave, they're very tight. And ideally by the third wave, we'll be in the safest space, because we really do want to make sure that the chatbot is providing reliable legal information. That's really what Law for Nonprofits is about. Yeah, so that's just a quick nutshell presentation about the chatbot. If you have any questions, I can try my best to answer them.
Yeah, thank you. This is fascinating, and I think really hits a sore point for so many organizations, as you say, with these small budgets, who still have compliance and things that they need to do for the community. I see Daryl's throwing some questions in too. Everyone wrote questions into the chat, and I will make sure we bring them to us. So I'm going to start going back a little bit actually to some of the stuff that Minnie first demoed just on the website more broadly, which is to say, Canada doesn't just have one thing governing nonprofits. There's individuals, like there's provincial level nonprofit acts. There's also a national one. The information that's currently on the website, is that British Columbia specific? Is that Canada wide? Like, what does that actually cover?
That's a good question. So what we have right now is very specific to BC. Some of the contents or areas are actually across Canada. So what we usually recommend is that we have the information. Keep in mind, this space is focused. At the moment, we're trying to scale that across Canada, so the content is going to be changing.
Mhm.
So it is somewhere in between. As you saw in the demonstration, I had the Canada anti-spam law, so that covers the entire country. And then we have the BC Commissioner of Privacy. I think that's what it was. So we have tried to provide both angles in terms of the legal resources on the website.
So that's useful to know that sort of some of it, as you say, is very BC specific. Like that's the default. Some things like Castle are more national and so are going to apply across the country. I'm really fascinated by how you got to this place. So over many years, there has been this corpus of knowledge and best practices and templates produced by PLEO. And as you say, you've already had several ways. You've got here's like the more like the WYSIWYG, like here's a step. Is it yes, no? You've got like this journey you can take people through, or they can look at one pagers, or they can look at the FAQ. There's a number of different mental modalities to say, oh, how do I best find the information? How do I best learn and engage? With all of that, now you're bringing this new modality in the form of this chatbot, as say, this more conversational thing. It's a bit more free form. Did you have to take and restructure any of that data? Or did you basically just say, we've got the data, like our corpus of knowledge is done, AI chatbot, robot, have fun with it? Like, how did you, like, what have you had to do data wise to prepare it for the chatbot?
We have we do have a lot of stuff in our database. And so most wish I could remember. There's a term called a RAG. With
Yeah.
anybody knows about AI, I can't remember what RAGs. It's all over my head, but it's like all the information that's in there. We transferred that information, created basically a repository of all that information, and the chatbot, which to answer the technology used to implement the chatbot, it is built, as I understand it. There you go, retrieval augmented generation. There you go. Thank you. I knew it was something like that, but couldn't remember it exactly. It is built on Chat GPT, and I'm not completely familiar with all the other stuff that's involved in it. But basically, it is what we're training it to do is to look through our stuff. So in the first wave of testing, it was, as I mentioned, it was pulling tons of stuff from the internet that was not our information, our verified information. So that was one of the things that we had to work because we want it based on solid, reliable, legal information, which we do have a large database. So it scans through that information. That's what the AI chatbot has been trained on. And that's because we know that our information is reliable. One thing we discovered, I didn't do this, but one of our testers was testing our chatbot and using Chat GPT. And what they found was that Chat GPT was really good for, say, the first level question. And then as you try and focus in on a particular point, it went further afield and was less focused. The goal with this specific chatbot intended for nonprofits is to have a reliable base of information. And so it actually should get sharper and more on point as you dig through it. Whereas Chat GPT, it appears through the testing anyway, sometimes goes farther afield and is pulling information from sources that we're not aware of.
Yeah, or starts hallucinating. So you're trying to
Yes.
really ground it in a corpus of verifiable knowledge by saying, yes, ChatGPT, you still have access to the whole of the internet. But what you want to really focus on then is what's already been produced, your own databases, your own material. To what level can you control that within the AI world? Like, how much is there like like a little knob you say really focus on our material, really ignore the rest of the world? Like, how do you set it to focus on your corpus of knowledge?
That's a question I wish I could answer more specifically. All I really know is the result and the conversations that I've had with
Right.
the guys at Contend. So when we started there were a lot of red flags raised from the first wave of testing because there was stuff that were like, actually, this isn't completely true. And this seems to be pulling from there. Interestingly, ChatGPT pulls from our website all the time. Actually, if you search on some of these questions, you law for nonprofits information. And I'm not sure how it's done, but you can build in guardrails. And actually, there's a lot of talk about guardrails, particularly around the conversations around social media these days, particularly with Twitter and Facebook and stuff, moving away from content moderation. And there were guardrails built in. If you use this language, your thing's going to get flagged and you're going to start a process where they look at it. So in our chatbot, we're trying to build those guardrails in because there will be questions that come from nonprofits that maybe deal with real estate. Now, real estate is not, we're mostly geared towards governance and some of the employment related things, privacy, things like that, that really affect the governance of a nonprofit. So you will, and this is what I was discovering when I was testing it before coming on, because I wanted to make sure I had a question that was going to take me a few levels. That right now, with the way that it's set, you do hit guardrails. If it thinks it's about real estate, it's going to say, this is, I can't remember what it says, but it seems the question you're asking is about real estate. And that's not part of what we do. And so the process of refining the guardrails is trying to have enough guardrails in place that we're not giving information that is not really part of what we do. But at the
Right.
same time, you can have the conversations. You don't want questions that we can answer to hit a guardrail and then it to not be answered.
So I actually have so many questions on guardrails. So you're going through basically, you go through the testing. You're like, ooh, that is not at all the kind of things we wanted. What does a guardrail look like? Do you just structure it as like a sentence? Is it just like basically a prompt saying, if it says any of these 7 things, say, sorry, we're not going any further. Like, how do you give it these guardrails? How do you structure and think through them?
That's the thing. I wish I could give a more specific answer. I have seen some of the stuff that they've built, and it is very much like that. It just says if you there's to me, it all seems like magic to me. Particularly the first wave of testing. I was like, it's incredible. And it was when the lawyers and the people that know more about law, because they were like, what is this is all sorts
Yeah,
of
yeah,
red
you're like,
flags.
yes, that sounds right, but it isn't.
This is incredible. These things are so smart. And yeah, it is about identifying language. It's a language-based model, right? And so you do try to identify words or phrases
Yeah,
that maybe relate to something. And this is why it takes a lot to refine it because
yeah,
some, like a question about volunteers and privacy or something, probably wouldn't end up sounding like real estate's on my mind because that was the thing that I was bumping up against today. Also, we're hoping to expand. I think Minnie can back me up on this, and I hope I'm not making this up. Some of the stuff around, specifically around charities. Right now, a lot of the charitable stuff is a guardrail because we don't have as large a repository of information around it.
just to pull the distinctions, you're talking about basically nonprofit like governance and rules versus things that are very specifically around the people covered by the charitable.
Yes, and a lot of it's the same, but we certainly don't have stuff about taxes because that's not a
Right. So
thing that.
tax receipting, that kind of very common question you'll see within the sector.
Yes, at the moment we don't have stuff on that, and I believe that there is some that there is a plan to include more stuff about charities. Charities can certainly use law for nonprofits, and most of the organizations that access it are actually charities, but there are some very specific laws and some governance things that we certainly don't have built into our platform yet, because
Yeah.
it gets increasingly complicated. And what we want to make sure, this is why it's so important about having the verified information. We want to make sure that we're giving reliable, actionable information, which is not always what ChatGPT has in mind when pulling from the full internet. We don't want to send anybody off with misinformation.
So what I've really learned here today is the easy part is throw the AI at your website and you can spin something up real fast. But what's really there is it's the testing and the guardrails that is the time consuming part, because you're actually trying to get it to give you the best, most consistent information. Minnie, were you involved in the testing process?
No, I was not. That's been something Chris and the rest of the team have been working on. I've been more involved in scaling the law for nonprofit platform across the country.
Then my question is really about testing. And it doesn't need to get to the technical part, but just for your team of testers, what does that process look like? Are you building out like a standard corpus of questions you're consistently asking to make sure you're getting closer to your end state answer? Do you have like a spreadsheet with like, here's a question, here's what the answer should be, and then you rate it like yes, no, like this time it was closer? What does that look like for your testers?
Yep, there's a big spreadsheet, and what we do is we put in our question, then they have us basically copy and paste the entire conversation that we have into that spreadsheet as well. And then we rate the information. And this is where some of our testers, like me, because I don't have a legal background, I would go, "Man, that was amazing." And if the lawyers going through it, or Martha, who is the legal director of Law for Nonprofits, she'll look at the answers and go, "Oh, this is making her head explode." Kind of. The process, the testing process itself is fairly straightforward. We go through it, we say this question, and it's sometimes we provide some information on what the scenario is. Like, this is a new hire at a nonprofit and it's a small nonprofit. We just try to create a scenario just so that when later, when the questions are being analyzed and the answers are being analyzed, that they're able to see what the question the testers had in mind. So yeah, you got that. And then rating the how was the flow of the conversation, was that good, and quality of the information, etc., that kind of stuff. So there's quite a
Oh,
large
so you're rating on
spreadsheet.
more than just A/B. Was it accurate? Was it inaccurate? You're also judging the conversation itself. What's that look like?
Obviously, I didn't run into any when I was testing, and I did hours and hours of testing. I didn't run into any strange language or anything, but obviously they were looking for anything that was like way off base or any glitches. And there were phases where we were hitting a lot of glitches, and we had to contact the guys in Toronto, and we did some diagnostics and we were able to fix that. Part of the testing is to make sure it's robust enough and that it's able to respond to, for example, a lot of the questions that we get are not always well expressed. It's not like everybody is phrasing their questions so that an AI can easily understand it.
Like,
They ask questions like human beings ask, and I often phrase things. I've probably phrased many sentences incorrectly in this process of our conversation. And so the AI needs to understand that and ideally be able to respond to the question. And so we do look at the language. And as I said, I didn't really encounter any language issues, but again, it's a language-based model. So there is stuff written into the code to answer questions in a certain way. So we want to make sure that those answers are coming through and that they're clear. And then the more intensive phase, I would say, is then when Martha, our legal director, and another lawyer who works with us will then read through the questions and the answers and That's one of the key parts of our testing process.
Right.
From a legal standpoint, is to make sure that the stuff is legally valid. And that's the principal concern for Martha, our legal
Yeah.
director.
So this is really interesting because what I'm hearing here is unlike maybe some other technology projects where like testing is half the work, this sounds like testing is the work. Like getting it up and running wasn't that hard. What's hard is training it and pushing it towards consistently accurate, correct answers.
Yes, that's a big thing for us. And certainly for Martha, I don't know if it keeps her up at night, but it is certainly one of the things that gives her pause through the whole process. Because if we're going to have a chatbot, it has to be reliable because
Yeah, it's like
we
there is
want
some
to,
risk associated with it. Yeah.
yeah, and we do not want to do anything to increase the risk for nonprofits. We are specifically there to reduce risk. And as Minnie said, we're looking to help places avoid legal crises. We don't want the chatbot to be responsible or play a role in creating.
Yeah, you're coming at something which is a little bit different. So our most recent presentation was around basically some environmental researchers who were getting AI to review like PDFs from banks and basically say what are their environmental policies? Are they is what they're doing aligned with what they say they're going to do? And so they wrote their research bots to be expansive, to give them potential false positives because they didn't want to miss anything. So they went broad because they're just producing it for themselves.
Right.
And then a human's going to review. What you're producing is a little bit different because you don't get a chance to review the results before they go to the end user. So it doesn't, so I can see why you're really focused on keeping the tightest, most guardraily version of this because you don't get to see until afterwards when you look at the logs what actually happened here. But both of you went through a lot of this process of I'm bringing experts against results, and they go through this process over and over again, which is to say, here's the questions, here it is, here's the answers, and then you do the review. Say, was it a false positive? Was it a false negative? Was it here? And if it wasn't, what do I need to tweak in the process somewhere to get us to closer to accurate answers? And I'm really hearing that review process is so important with what you're doing. We're coming up towards the end of the hour. In fact, we're
Yeah.
just over. But I just want to thank you so much. This is really interesting. One, just get a sense of what already exists out there around legal advice for nonprofits, a really helpful thing, because otherwise every small nonprofit, I need to have a privacy policy. That sounds terrifying and expensive, but there's actually these vetted templates and guidance to get you there and ways to understand what are my challenges. And then super interesting for lots of nonprofits who created FAQs, deep corpuses of knowledge to say, how can we expose that to more people? And you open that up in other ways. And it sounds like there are some interesting tools that are emerging. Sounds like you're using in the back end Chat GPT. And for anyone who's ever gone into Chat GPT, there is like this GPT, like little mini app thing where you can basically do the light test version of what's happening with PLEO, where you get to say, here's my corpus of knowledge. Here's the 5 sentences of instructions. Go do it. Go write me a little grant proposal because I'm always going to need it to do these 5 things. And so you can create this little macro of saved steps. So for people who are curious about taking this kind of model into their organizations, I think your cheap and easy way is jump into ChatGPT, look at the GPT, like their little mini app feature, and just play around with them. They're very basic. There's 3 form fields you fill out, and it will give you a sense of, is this a kind of experience that could be worthwhile for you? And if it is, then you can try and find some money and do amazing things.